Welcome back. As I mentioned earlier, I have a special guest here today, Sister Rabia Khidr. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Sister Rabia is the founder and the executive director of CAMD, which would be Canadian Association
Of Muslims with Disabilities.
of Muslims with Disabilities. Sister Rabia, of course, you've been in many television shows and you've spoken in different platforms. Tell our viewers a little bit about CAMD.
CAMD, Canadian Association of Muslims with Disabilities, is an organization of people with disabilities striving to create an inclusive society, essentially trying to promote the inclusion of people with disabilities within our places and spaces of faith.
Or specifically the spaces of faith, or in society in general?
In society in general, but with a focus on the fact that people with disabilities have a right to learn and experience their faith, and in this case being Islam.
Excellent. So we will have some more discussion on the issue of accessibility a little bit later in the show. Just one question here. So what was the driving force or the impetus behind establishing this? I know you mentioned that this is the goal, but at the personal level for you.
Well, at a personal level, I obviously have a disability. I'm blind. I have siblings, brothers with intellectual disabilities. My sister also has the same vision loss that I have. So there's 4 of us in the family. And growing up in Canada, we had very little opportunity to learn about Islam and participate within our Islamic centers. And as we've worked a lot in the mainstream around disability, I thought it was time that we bring it into the community, bring that experience into the community and increase the participation of people with disabilities within the Muslim community.
And let's be frank a little bit, and I don't mind, I always in this show try to highlight some things. I don't like to mention anything negative, but reality is, and this is not only in Canada or mosques, in the Muslim world really, the people with disability don't have access to many things, and this is a fact. I'll give you an example. I was recently overseas in the Middle East, and I give a few things about Canada and the Canadian experience. And for us Muslims, I mentioned that the city wouldn't give you a permit, or building permit, or occupancy permit, unless you have access for disabled people in the washrooms and everything. You can't get that. And people like, is that serious? I said, yes, because one person who may even not happen to come maybe once in 10 years, after 10 years you have one person who would come with disability to that center. He or she will need. So the good thing in Canada, that the dignity of each human being, including everyone with disability, is preserved. And I said, this is how good is Canada, or of course in North America or in Europe, they have focused very much on the dignity of everyone, including people with disability.
Yes, definitely. And that's, simply what we're trying to encourage be applied within our places of worship, within the mosques. There are many mosques, many larger centers that are accessible, that have, the washroom facilities and the designated disabled parking. But, unfortunately, sometimes people without permits think that that's an open spot and they got to rush and pray and they park in it, restricting access for somebody with a disability.
Why?
They just disregard it. Suddenly.
Or they are just selfish people.
Yes.
Put it this way.
Yes.
Selfishness. We have on you. I mean, how could you be a Muslim with the meaning of Muslim and then you're? I mean, this is a funny thing. We claim to believe and practice, and we want peace, and we're not keeping the peace. You can't keep the peace if you don't have, if you take the spot of someone who needs it more than you, because you don't want to walk or it's cold, and you can walk. And this is basically selfishness. I don't know how to solve it. Education, maybe?
Education, definitely. We really need to do a lot of work around shifting people's attitudes. And that is not just within the Muslim community. But there are negative attitudes toward people with disabilities in general, even though in Western societies we have achieved a lot in giving people dignity and worth. We wouldn't have to be putting laws in place and enforcing that if people had changed their attitudes. And you know, they're just beginning to, I think.
So inclusiveness now, the issue of inclusiveness is an attitude, by the way. An attitude, and of course a policy, and also because a lot of times we talk a lot, when we come to reality there is nothing. So would you agree with me, it's an attitude that people have to have from a very early age? Children who should have develop this attitude towards the people who are in need of such consideration. So inclusiveness doesn't happen like that. And education, even education, one seminar or one workshop or one flyer is not enough. How do you come to that, as we speak today about toward inclusiveness in our society? How do we change society like that?
I think when people start understanding how exclusion happens, that's when we can start making that shift. And how that happens is when people can actually experience themselves feeling left out, feeling excluded for ridiculous reasons, maybe because of the color of their skin, maybe because of the way they dress, maybe because of the language they speak or the class they represent. When they feel it firsthand, feel that sense of exclusion, then they start appreciating why they have to shift their attitude to include others.
Indeed, you're right. So basically what you're saying, unless people get it to their bones, to understand how others feel it. So the golden rule comes here in play. So unfortunately, this is the case. People don't act unless calamities happen. And that's why we always try to focus on prevention, you know, being ready before it happens. Unfortunately, again, people do not act until bad things happen. And you said something, and you reminded me of a person I know who spent time in hospital. He had this GBS, which is a syndrome that hits, it's a very dangerous syndrome. And this, he was actually crippled for a long time in the hospital, for a year. And one of the things he said, I started appreciating everything. And then he became conscious of the parking issue. He said, in my life, I never cared about, you know, parking for this or that. So we're learning many good things here in the West on how to treat our fellow human beings, especially those with disability.
Unless people experience disability firsthand, unless they have somebody in their life who has a disability, unless, you know, they end up in a temporary situation of disability, they really do not appreciate what some of these privileges that are available are really, how important they are to people with disabilities, like the parking, accessible parking, like ramps, like automatic door openers.
Speaking of that, there is a legislation which we will talk about just after the break. Stick around, we'll continue our interesting discussion on towards an inclusive society. So we'll be back after these messages. Assalamu alaikum, peace be with you. We have recently embarked on a big community project for our youth, for our senior citizens, for our children, for the future of our community. It is a place that we have purchased, and it is, of course, going to be renovated. As you see, this is the future building of the Sayeda Khadija Centre, a place to pray, learn, and play, a place where families could get together. Support this project, as it is a project that needs focus and needs support. It is costly, but we can do it. We can do it with our efforts. Even if there are small contributions, they can make a big difference. For more information, visit www.sayedakhadijacentre.com or simply skcentre.com, or call us at 1-888-201-339.